Todd Fields, and I want to welcome you to the Worship Circle podcast, video version on our YouTube channel. As a ministry, we exist to let worship leaders around the world know that they're loved and not alone. If you're a worship leader, you know what it's like to pour out to people, to serve people week after week. And rarely do we take the time to pause and go on a journey to allow anyone to pour into us, to care for our soul, to be loved by brothers and sisters around us. And that's what we do. Our purpose is that you would know that you're loved and that you're not alone. We have mentors waiting for you to apply to their small group. And you can do that by going to worshipcircle.com/apply. And we are standing by to review your application, to help you with scholarships if that's what you need. And we can't wait to meet you. But for now, we hope you enjoy this podcast. Guys, I want to welcome you. We'll have some more jumping in, John, as we go along. But some of our coaches will be in here today. Charlie Hall. Welcome, Charlie. Meredith will be jumping in from Nashville. Charlie's in Oklahoma. Tasha Cobbs is in South Carolina. Travis Green's in South Carolina. And Rita is coming in from Nashville, Rita Springer. So all of these, John, are just our Worship Circle members, and this is the third month of our term, and we end in September. But we meet online every month and just keep growing closer, you know, being real with each other, praying with each other, learning together. And I specifically wanted to have you on just because of, you know, years of reading your books, your heart for the heart and heart for the church in that. And we're oftentimes in a realm of being professional Christians where we're called on to pour out week after week after week. And sometimes it feels like it's not going to end. But guys, welcome John Eldredge. He's in Colorado Springs joining us today. And many of you, we'll do the silent hand claps. That's the way we can do it without causing feedback and dogs to bark in the background. But John, welcome. I'm just going to tee it up and toss it to you. And guys, John may from time to time ask some questions and throw them out there. And if you have a question when he does that, just raise your hand and I'll scan the horizon and call on you, and you can jump in that way. But we'll get going now. I'm going to pray for us, kick it off, and then we'll get going. Okay.
Awesome.
Jesus, thank you that you are with us now. Holy Spirit, you're present even through technology all around the world. But these leaders, they're precious to you. And I just ask God, I thank you for John and Stacy and the work you've continually do in their story and their life and the way that you've used it in my life and so many of our lives, just to encourage us to pursue your heart, to follow your heart, and to tend and care for ours. And Lord, we just ask that you speak through John now, give him sensitivity where you're leading, and at the same time, allow our hearts to be open to what you might say in the whisper, or just a plain audible voice today from you. So we're grateful and pray that you just use this time for your glory on the back end. In your name we pray. Amen. Welcome,
Amen.
John.
Thanks, guys. It is just awesome to see your faces. So hi, everybody. Hi, everyone, and thank you. Thank you. Worship has been an absolute lifeline and rescue to Stacy and me over the years, but especially as, you know, our ministry influence has grown and the pressures have grown and the warfare has grown and all of that. Golly, thank you. Just the body of Christ, the friends of Jesus need you more than ever. And they may not know it. Most of them don't know it. They don't know how much they need you, but I'm here to tell you they sure do. And thank you. And I'll say a little bit about why in some context of our hour here. But I think what I want to begin is just some simple stuff around caring for your own heart and soul, particularly at a time like this. The world has gone completely mad. And that madness has crept into the church in a lot of ways. The world gets in the church and it creates a perfect storm that is designed suck the life out of us, and designed to, oh golly, just drain your hearts in ways that are just so brutal, particularly because you're asked to live from the heart a lot. Like, bring your heart, as Todd was just saying in the introduction, every week. And so I want to say some things around that. I've been a Christian therapist for more than 30 years, and writer, shepherd guy. We lead a pretty big audience of people around the world, and we're down deep in the weeds in a lot of people's trauma and loss and heartache and joy and love and breakthrough and beauty and redemption. So hopefully I've got a few things that at the end of our conversation you'll go, wow, that was super helpful. I think one of the things I want to say to you is so simple, but you will rarely hear this in the church. You'll certainly very rarely hear it in the professional church. The world will not tell you this. And what I need to tell you is your heart is the greatest treasure you have ever been given by God. Your heart is everything. And that's why Proverbs 4:23 has kind of been one of our go-to over the years. It's just been so, we keep looping back to it because, we learn it, forget it, pay for it, come back to it, learn it, forget it, pay for it, and the Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, because it is the wellspring of life within you. Your heart is the source of your joy and your dreams. It's the source of friendship and love and romance. Your heart's everything. Your heart is the truest you. Your heart is where you experience intimacy with God. And all of us have a story of how our heart has been handled in the course of our life, in our childhood and in our teenage years, and then into our young adult and adult life. The story of your life, the true story of your life, is the story of your heart and of the journey of your heart in this world, and the hatred of the enemy against your heart. And we're living in a particular time that has a madness to it that makes practicing Proverbs 4:23 really hard, like guarding your heart. New American Standards Version is with all diligence. RSV is vigilantly guard your heart. Like really, like this is because it is the wellspring of life within you. As a young therapist, golly, 30 years ago, I began to experience something really interesting listening to the men and women who were coming into my office. I was a Christian therapist, so most of them were believers, many of them in ministry and, missions. And it was a remarkable phenomenon that went like this. As people began to get better, as men and women began to heal from childhood trauma or betrayal by the church or just chronic disappointment, loneliness, the different things we have to navigate in the war of the heart. As they began to get better, and as they began to recover wholeheartedness, they began to become creative. And I would have clients come in and say, hey, I took up watercolor. And they would be like the last person, they'd be like an accountant or a CPA or, and you go, really? That's fast, how wonderful. And then the next client would come in and go, oh, guess what? I'm working with horses. And I'd be like, you? Really? And so here was the beautiful thing I discovered, that as we heal, as we become more wholehearted, among all the joys of that, you get your creativity back, and your creativity begins to flourish and flow, and it's a joy. And and so as creatives, here we are, me in the writing world and you in the composition and performance world and leading people in worship, to recover heart, to protect our heart is, oh man, it's worth the time and the effort, and the madness won't tell you that. The church will rarely tell you that, but I'm here to tell you that. Like, your heart matters. It's the great treasure of the kingdom. And because I am in professional Christian work too, and have been, for all these years, I've learned a lot of things through my own crash and through my own dry times and through the war on the heart. And I wanted to just share some things that I think would be helpful to you, because prior to the pandemic and then the blow up of the racial tension, prior to all this moment, the world had already gone mad. And what we consider to be a normal human life, like I'm just here as a voice in the wilderness to tell you it's absolutely nuts what people expect of themselves. It was the combined pace of life, everybody running a jillion miles an hour and trying to get a jillion things done. It was the complexity, the growing complexity of the world that we've got to navigate at church and with people and their trauma and careers and kids, and then it was the advent of the technology age. 2007, this little baby came out, and the iPhone, and the way that's changed everybody's life forever. 4 to 10 hours a day we're all spending on this thing, 3 hours a day using apps. And so you had this perfect storm coming together, because the big lie of technology was that it was going to give us all more margin, time with God, time with each other, time to cook, time to garden, and it did just the opposite. Now we're expected to live at the pace of technology. We're asking our souls to live at the pace of machinery and technology. And then you add one more piece to that, and it was the inundation of media. The human soul was never meant to know the news of the world. You actually were never meant to know that. The human beings were designed to live in very small and very intimate communities. And I don't know if it will help someone to mute themselves, but we're picking up your family life. So if somebody's not muted, it's darling. We love your family life, but thank you. This is a very fascinating thing. There's a British anthropologist who did a number of studies on global villages through human history, and also on the size of the human brain and the cerebral cortex. And what he came to the conclusion of is a famous thing now called Dunbar's number. He said human beings are able to handle the news, crisis, trauma, stories, joys, heartaches of about 150 people. And what's happened in our era is, if you're a mature friend of Jesus, if you're, considered a compassionate, relevant, dialed in person, you're supposed to know about everything that's going on in the world. From Syria to Turkey to human trafficking to, the latest death count in New York and Rome, and like, whoa, that's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And all of that has had this withering effect on the human soul, on the human heart. So that's the perfect storm. And that was prior to this moment that we're all living in, and doing church online and social distancing, and and then the heartbreak that's been going on in cities in the US. And so this is a very, very brutal time on the heart. This is a brutal time to be a human being, because there's no room left to be human. You don't get to be human anymore. There's no space for it. So I began to look for a set of practices that I could practice in my real life, which is full tilt. My life is full tilt. I have an organization of about 19 people. We have a global influence. We do live events and weekly podcasts, and we make films and all that. So we're full tilt. I had to find some way to care for my heart and to care for my soul without just quitting. and yeah, I just want to be a monk. I just want to retire to some small Scottish village and never come back. Can't do that. Don't feel called to do that. So began to do some things to care for my soul and to help me stay in a place of love and help me stay in a life with God in the midst of the pressure. And I need to name this other additional pressure that we all share. And it's nuts. It's just nuts. It's the pressure to perform out of your life with God. So like, go get some good stuff. Go get some intimacy, go get a great experience, get a revelation, get a song, and then bring it back and produce. For me, it's write a book and then write another and do a podcast, do a blog, and this thing of having to produce out of our life with God can be really, really brutal. So there I was, and there we all are. And I began to look for some things that would heal my soul. And I want to talk about a few of those things, offer them to you. Super accessible, very doable. And then I want to talk a little bit about the moment that we're living in right now, because it requires some other things to care for your heart. So the first thing is back to my career as a therapist. I don't have a private practice anymore because what I do now, it just got so big and kind of blew up on us, and the curse of success and that sort of thing. So we do it in groups of people now. We do it with 50 and 100 and 400 and 2,000. And we still try and make our experiences very healing experiences, very heart restoring experiences, but I don't have a private practice anymore. But as I did, back in the days that I did, one of the other things that I discovered, that wholeheartedness, creativity link, was the link between beauty and the healing of trauma. That I would have clients coming in with the most horrific stories. I mean, the worst stuff. And over time, as they began to get better, I was trying to learn from them as much as they were trying to learn from me. And as we would discover together things that were healing, one of the things that kept resurfacing is the power of beauty to heal the human soul. And I think God knew that. I know he knew that because he said, we're air-breathing creatures. We need oxygen every moment. Everybody right now is breathing. And you need to breathe again. And by the time I get done with this sentence, you need to breathe again. So God saturated the planet with oxygen. And then he did the coolest thing ever. He made it a replenishing source. So, the taiga forest and the rainforest and the algae of the seas and all that, like, regenerates the global supply of oxygen every day, which is unbelievably cool. And he knew that. He knew we'd need that. And he knew, we're water creatures. You can't go more than 3 days without it. And so we need water. We need to hydrate. And so he saturated the planet with water and the rain cycle. And from outer space, we're the blue planet because we're so saturated in water. But here's the fascinating question no one asked. Why did God saturate the world with beauty? He has absolutely saturated our world with beauty, like the sunlight coming through your kitchen window in the morning, and the power of music and art, and the rain on a tin roof, and like it's just everywhere. It is in the bark of trees, and it's in human faces, and it's in human hands. It's just everywhere. The laughter of your children, like the world is saturated with beauty. And I think God did that because he knew life would be traumatizing. And to just be fair to you, I need to tell you, your life is traumatizing. To live in this hour right now in the world is traumatizing. And one of the things they're going to discover, and they're beginning to admit it now, but when we come out, whenever it is we come out of the quarantine and the pandemic and all that, they're going to realize that taking away everyone's normal life, making them stay at home, making them spend hours a day in technology was traumatizing. The bombardment of the constant death count in the news was traumatizing. And so I'm just telling you, dear ones, your life is traumatizing. And God knew that. And so he saturated the world in beauty. And what I began to do as a therapist and then just for my own life is to saturate my life with beauty. Beauty heals the soul. Beauty heals the soul. And again, the pace of life and the amount of time on media and technology and all that sort of thing, we're not taking advantage of it. It's like we're walking down the sidewalk and there's $100 bills lying all over the place and we don't stop to pick them up. You'll see the beauty and you go, oh, wow, that's really cool. And then, we just blow past it. But what I'm learning my soul needs is to pause and receive the beauty that's coming to me every day and let the beauty in my soul. And more than that, now I seek it out. Like I am an active, ravenous hunter for beauty in the world, and filling my home with beauty and filling my life with beauty every opportunity I can, because the world is such a hard place on the heart right now. So the practice of beauty, and for me, one of the switches was to pause and to literally say, I receive this beauty into my soul. It's not just to observe it. It is to drink it, to take it in, to let it into your soul, and especially into the hurting and famished places in your soul. So if I'm walking out the door in the morning and it's a frosty morning here in Colorado, and I get in my car and there's the frost on my windshield, I stop and I look at it and I see how exquisite it is. And I say, Father, thank you. I received this gift of beauty into my soul. It's just a moment. It's a pause. It's an intentionality to let beauty do its healing work. And this is a fascinating thing. People in hospitals recover faster, are released sooner, and need less pain medication if they simply have a window that looks out on nature. Isn't that awesome? Like, that is so beautiful, because you're there in a hospital and, it's the chaos and the beeping and the IVs and all that. But if you can simply have a window on beauty, you actually get better faster. You heal. That's the healing power of beauty, particularly in the traumatized places in our souls. So beauty is one. Get beauty in your life, friends. And again, part of our problem as creatives is we're always looking at, like beauty turns into something productive. I'm not talking about producing. Not in order to write a song, not in order to finish my book, but just because my soul needs it. And needs it every day. So that's a simple practice, and it's available to everybody, and it's free. There's just tons of it around. It's absolutely tons of it. Your faces right now are incredibly beautiful. So there's just loads of it around. But begin to drink it in, make it intentional, make it like a practice. It's one of your monastic practices. Okay, so second one, very simple. What I realized is that the pace of modern life, the amount of media, the technology, all that, the perfect storm, the madness, was allowing me no room for transitions. And what I was doing is I was requiring my soul to just move through multiple gear changes in a single day without any room for transition. So I would go from a really sweet moment with my 3-year-old granddaughter straight into a really critical business meeting, and then into, I still do some counseling. So then into a counseling phone call, but then after that, it's lunch with a friend, and it's joy, and it's tacos on the deck. But then from there, I've got to race over. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is normal life for everybody. There is literally no transitional spaces. And one of the things we have missed in the Gospels is in the story of Jesus's life, we project a modern pace into it. And so, when we read Jesus left Jerusalem and, went back up to Capernaum, we go, oh yeah, boom. And then it's the next healing, the next miracle. And Jesus's life in the Gospels feels like it's just boom, 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 boom. One amazing word, one incredible teaching, then an intimate moment, then raising Peter's mother-in-law, and it's not. Because actually it's a 3-day trip from Jerusalem back up to Capernaum. 3 days on foot. And these are all the moments in the gospel that there's just transitional space. Like he's not living from one urgent need to another. And in fact, in the Gospel of Mark, in chapter 1, the momentum gets going, and the revival has started, and things are really happening, and it's everything everybody wants. It's what we all want to see in our churches and our work, and in our in bringing Jesus to the world. Things are happening, and here's what it says. It says the next morning the entire village showed up at the door. Okay, so the revival is working. And they go to find Jesus, and they can't find him. He's gone. He's already taken off. He's over in the woods by himself, drinking in beauty. And they go to find him, and Peter says, Jesus, everyone's looking for you. And Jesus' response is, we better leave. Like, he is so brilliant at not being ruled by human need. And he doesn't pace his life according to human need. Okay, anyway, the grace that I'm talking about is the grace of transition. And for me, it began just at the end of my day when I'd pull in the driveway, turn off the engine in my car. Normally it's get out, blast into the house, because now you've got home life and you got to do this, that, and the other thing. And I would just pause. I just sit in my car for a few minutes, and I wouldn't listen to a podcast. I wouldn't do anything. I'd just sit there and do nothing. I'm allowing myself transitional moments between work life and home, and between home life and mission, and between mission life and joy, and like even going into a lunch with friends. Like, I want to enjoy that. I really do. And I want to be present to their company. But I can't just blast in. I need transitional space. I'm not talking 30 minutes. I'm not talking a 2-week vacation. I'm just saying allowing a rhythm into your life that gives your soul time between one type of emotion and another. Like, this is super intense and demanding. We've got a rehearsal. We got to get this done. Back to home. And at home, I want to be loving and present and chill and playful, and right? You understand what I'm saying? So just allowing the grace of transition back into your life, like let your soul inform you. Because the beautiful thing about Proverbs 4:23 is your heart will tell you. Your heart will let you know when it is not doing well. Like, it protests. It puts up a fight, paying attention to what your heart needs, and trying to provide transitional spaces, which the world will never encourage you to do. We are all stuck on one speed right now, and it is go. And it's just brutal. I'm going to give you a third practice. Keep this really simple, really available. And it begins with a story. So I love Jesus. I love Jesus. I love Jesus. And I love his people, and I love his work in the world. And there's nothing I'm a pretty big empathy guy, cry at commercials, that kind of thing. And I was coming to Jesus in prayer. This is a story that goes over the last couple of years. I'd come to Jesus in prayer about something, my kids, my taxes, a big decision, a conference, something. And Jesus began saying this. He said, John, give everyone and everything to me. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's good. Yes, Lord, that is so good. Okay, so what I was talking about was this conference we're doing, Jesus. And he would just stop me and he'd say, I want you to give everyone in your world and everything to me. I want you to practice this. Honestly, gang, he kept this up for 6 months. 6 months. Because I wasn't doing it. Like, I would give intellectual assent to it. I go, oh yeah, that's good. I mean, that's 1 Peter 5:7, right? Cast all your cares upon the Lord because he cares for you. Like, yeah, my yoke is easy, my burden's light. That verse has always irritated me, by the way. I'm like, no, it's not. it's like there's nothing light about it. So I knew that I didn't know how to practice something. And what I didn't know how to practice is benevolent detachment. Benevolent detachment. I put the two words together for a reason. Benevolent, because it's something done out of love. It's something done out of kindness. I'm not angry. I'm not cynical. I'm not checked out. I'm not giving the world the finger. I'm just in love and in kindness. I'm saying, I'm sorry, I can't carry you. I can't carry that. And detachment, learning to peel yourself out of the Velcro and out of the chaos and the madness. And there are so many applications for this, but every day, especially at bedtime, but I do it several times a day now, I pause and I say, Jesus, I give everyone and everything to you. And for all of us who are in Jesus' work and in people and church and mission and global transformation and justice and healing of the brokenhearted, you can't carry it. You just can't. You can't carry tomorrow. You can't. Like, one of the things about the pandemic that was really fascinating, I mean, it still is, but one of the themes through this has been uncertainty. Nobody knows what the economy is going to do, really. Nobody knows what COVID-19 is going to do, really. They think it's going to surge back in the fall. Nobody knows when the vaccines are coming, really, and how effective they'll be. Like, the whole thing around us has been uncertainty. And I think God has been in that, by the way. I think he's saying, stop looking to the world for your certainty. Let me be your certainty. So you got to just let all that go. You can't live with that. You can't carry that. You can't get sucked into the speculation or the human need. Benevolent detachment. I give everyone and everything to you. And it has been one of the most life-saving practices. I'm giving you 3 of a number of things I do, but beauty and allowing for some transitional space in my life. Allowing myself to be human again is really what that means. And then letting it go, benevolent detachment, have just been absolute rescues, like full-on rescues. Okay, so now I want to say, as I was praying for this time and asking Jesus what to share, he did want me to talk to you a little bit about what our situation is right now as the friends of Jesus in this world. So I'm gonna kind of pull back the curtain on some things that you may be very aware of, maybe not so much, but more than 2 years ago, there were some very significant forces released on the earth, and one of them was hatred. There was a massive release from the kingdom of darkness of hatred in the world, and I think you can look at it now and go, holy smokes, no kidding. From Syria to Atlanta to LA to, it's just, the hatred has really been off the charts. And as Ephesians says, we wrestle not with flesh and blood. There are very real human issues in any marriage, in any church, in any community. But what I'm talking about is the release of serious demonic hatred in the world. And we have found it absolutely essential for the life of our heart and the life of our marriage, the life of our mission and community, to pray and invoke the love of God as a shield around us in this hour. And then invoking love into everything we do. So, into our conversation today, I invoke the love of God, and into my marriage, I invoke the love of God, and so on and so forth. Like, gang, I'm really serious. There is some massive darkness right now that's hammering the human race. And it'll come against your own heart in a whole bunch of ways that feel like accusation or diminishment or you suck or trying to bait you to get into hatred towards people or political groups. You can't even post anything on social media anymore without instantly being hated. Like, seriously, you can put a picture of your dog up there and somebody hates you for it. So this is pretty serious, and invoking the love of God. Deuteronomy 4 and Hebrews 12 says, our God is a consuming fire, a jealous God, that the love of God is fire. And so I pray the fire love of God around me and my family and my kids and around our work, like really, really important. One of the other forces that got released about 2 years ago on the earth from the kingdom of darkness was spirit of death. And obviously, then we had, all the stuff going on in Syria and ISIS, but it was global, and it was just the suicide rate in the U.S. just went off the charts in the last couple of years. In fact, Colorado Springs was the suicide capital of the U.S. for a year here, and we're talking middle school kids. So death began rampaging on the earth, but not primarily physical death. And this is where it's going to be really helpful for guarding your heart. What it was trying to usher in was the end of things. And I found myself battling it in ways like giving up on relationships and just saying, we've been friends with those folks for 30 years, but it's too much work. I think I'll just let that go. Without really thinking about it or praying about it. I would have projects I was doing, books I was writing, and I was just going to abandon them. I just say, I'm not going to write anymore. I think I'm done writing. I don't want to be a writer anymore. And this was how death was getting into my heart. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul says, we despaired of life. We felt the sentence of death in our hearts. And when the sentence of death gets in your heart, you start abandoning things. You give up dreams, you give up projects, you give up on a lot of things that give you life. You're like, I'm not gonna ride my bike anymore. I don't know. I'm just gonna let that go. And it's like, that was so life-giving to you. Or you give up on, plans for the future because, the economy and the pandemic and who knows. So, I'm just not gonna look forward to anything. Like, I'm not looking forward to anything is a good symptom of the sentence of death getting in our hearts. And if we're going to guard our hearts in this hour, you have got to guard your heart against that, because it is rampaging out there. And so we are invoking the life of God. We are invoking the river of life as a shield around us. I'm not talking about getting in a cage fight with these guys, because these are very high-ranking things that have been released in the world, and you don't want to get into a UFC fight with them, but you can shield your heart, you can shield your home, you can shield your work with the resurrection of Jesus Christ and with the power of the river of life. Ezekiel and John both see the river of life flowing from the throne of God, and it's the very life of God that's flowing constantly to his people. Like, we need his life. And so we invoke the river of life as a shield around us against all death. And we guard our hearts against those agreements with the sentence of death. Well, I'm just going to quit. I'm going to give up on that. These people don't like me. I don't belong here. I don't fit. No one understands. It's all that. It's just everything that leads to a kind of death, whether that's the death of your garden or a relationship or a creative work or a mission project. Like, guard your hearts against that in this hour. So I needed to name those two things because they're really, really, really rampaging now. I think what I want to do, I have one more thing I want to share with you, and it's by way of a request. But before I get there, I think I'll pause for a moment and say, would you like to ask a couple questions about what I've shared? Would that be helpful to you?
Absolutely, guys. Hey, I'm going to scan the horizon, you guys, for any hands that are up. And George, I saw yours first.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. But obviously we've seen, in history, we've seen hatred, we've seen spirit of death, we've seen these things before. They're not new. But what have you seen, and what are you seeing in the past 2 years that is kind of like you mentioned the suicide rate, but what are you seeing maybe that's like, wow, this is like a new, maybe primary agenda of
Yeah. Well, okay. So on the death thing, the suicide rate going through the thing, overdoses, narcotic overdoses were going through the ceiling. Also abuse, violence and abuse going through the ceiling. And then during the pandemic, the child abuse and the domestic abuse went absolutely through the roof. They had to set up emergency trauma centers in places like Paris and Rome to shelter women who were experiencing it. So you see, it's the intensity of the moment. And then on the hatred thing, the cover story of Time magazine was, how did we lose the internet to the culture of hate? There was something about the anonymity of the internet. You can just post anything, say anything, and you're not in an accountable community of people. So the internet just blew up with hatred, absolutely blew up. And American politics, for example, you literally cannot have a political conversation with someone that's just reasonable, because it immediately, it's the hatred gets in there and it's just, so, and part of it's just spiritual discernment. When Paul names the gifts of the Spirit, one of them is the discernment of spirits. We have a radar for this stuff, and Jesus shows us kind of the things that are going on in the world, so we know how to pray and how to help our people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yep. Gnarly time.
I've got Matt T. Matt, you raise your hand. You there?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. First of all, thank you, John, for all these things you shared. I'm going to spend hours kind of diving into each one individually. One of the questions I had was when you talk about practicing benevolent detachment, what are some practical things that you may have encountered in just practicing this with people that you may be, a lot of us lead teams or are responsible for certain things? How do we practically do that?
Yeah. Okay, this is so helpful. When you find yourself having a conversation with someone who is not in the room, right? It's when you leave, but you don't leave, and you're rehearsing what you want to say, or you're drafting that email you want to send. You're obsessing. Okay, you haven't let it go. You're actually getting into a soul tie thing with them. Whoa! I only want to have conversations with real people who are in my presence. Okay, so that's one. When you find yourself obsessing or rehashing, why did they say that? Why did they say that? Or why didn't I get invited to that? Or what? Or it's not just people; it's the news. When you hear of the heartache, that with the wildfires in Australia, 1.9 billion animals were killed. Billion. That wrecks me. I'm a nature guy. I'm an animal guy, and I would think about that, and it would just crush my heart. I have to let that go. So when you find yourself lingering over news, information, reports that the effect, you shall know them by their fruit. The effect of it is, I am not well. I am, you got to let it go. And it doesn't mean you don't care. It just means, 1 Peter 5:7, cast it on the Lord. You're not meant to carry the heartache of the world. And so that's a couple of tips there. So when I find myself obsessing, when I find myself under it, those are indications that I've got it. And I just say it out loud. I say, Jesus, I release that meeting to you. I release that email to you. I give my kids to you, especially at bedtime. Like I give it all to you, God. I give it all to you.
Great question, Matt. Yes, that was so good. I'm looking around for hands. Wait, we got one on the third screen. Lee, how are you? Yeah, you go next.
Hey, wow, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I am super sensitive, and I'm grateful to the Lord for it. But then again, sometimes I'm like, why? But spiritual warfare, and I felt it when you said that. I was like, oh my gosh, it's not just me that's feeling such a darkness that's happening. And I'm really struggling with wanting to live a life that's God honoring and loving. But then my flesh is so just, because I see so much and I want other people to see it as well.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to draw myself closer to those that are aware of the spiritual warfare so we can get on our hands and just cry out and weep. But I want to also do something for the kingdom physically.
Yeah. What
do you recommend?
Okay, so we could have spent our entire time on your question. So I just have to give you a couple nuggets. First off, you are all creative people. You are all in the business of love and beauty and worship and intimacy with God. So she's not the only one who has a high empathetic gifting. I would bet that about 99% of you do. And here's the thing, you have got to consecrate your empathy to Christ. People don't think to do this, but it's like any other gift. If you're a gifted teacher, you consecrate that to the Lord. If you're gifted at making money, you got to consecrate that to the Lord. If you're a gifted athlete, right? But this gifting, people don't consecrate their empathetic gifting. And then and then you just, it's the experience you were just describing. So in this world, in this moment, you do not want that beautiful empathetic gifting anywhere but deep in Christ. So on a pretty regular basis, weekly, daily, I would say, Jesus, I consecrate my empathetic gifting to you. This big heart you've given me, this care, I consecrate that to you, Lord. I consecrate that to you. And then this is a very important time to practice listening prayer for the friends of Jesus, because you have got to get your orders from the Lord. Jesus, do you want me to do anything about that? It is a really important question, because otherwise we just go do it, right? And we get involved, or we sign up, or and Jesus said, no, I got that covered through other friends of mine. You like, even in prayer, I'll go to Jesus in prayer. You'll get the text thread, right? You get the emergency text, and it's a group of people, and it's, hey, pray. And I'll pause and say, Jesus, is this covered? And he'll say, yeah, it's covered. You don't need to pray about it. I'm like, far out, because I got a lot more to do today. And so asking Jesus for your orders. I can't emphasize how important this is right now. Do not let your good heart simply guide you into anything, right? Anyway, like I said, I could go an hour on this. Consecrate your empathy, ask Jesus if he wants you to do anything about it.
So good. Thanks, Lee. John, I have a quick one. You mentioned trauma earlier, and that's you've been a therapist, so you've heard all kind of stories. I recently, just working with Michael, discovered that there was trauma in my story that I had never acknowledged. What are some signs for all of us in here today? You mentioned the trauma of the news right now. I feel like we're scared to even say that word because it sounds so weighty, but what are some signs that trauma is keeping you from truly living? And you may not have even had anyone say, maybe it would be a good idea to go do some work, you know?
Yeah, it's a big, Todd, thank you. That's a huge question. So first off, the news. Please, 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 please regulate your news intake to about 5 minutes a day. Okay? Because here's what they learned. After 9/11, when the terrorist strikes hit the Twin Towers, they did some studies, and they discovered that people who watched the events happen on television experienced the same PTSD as people who were there on the streets in New York. And what we've discovered is even consuming traumatizing news traumatizes the soul. So that's why I used the word freely today, Todd, because I said your lives are traumatic. They are. Just to live in this hour, it's brutal on the human soul. So please, please, please regulate your news intake, because it's addictive, and you know everybody's 5 minutes. Get in, get the basics, get out. Like, you honestly don't need to know what the death count is in Brazil. You don't. Like, you don't. You get the basics, get out, because of the effect it has on the human soul. But your question was, how could we be aware if there's trauma in our lives that may be unattended? A couple thoughts, just a couple things. Watch for what I call the flinch, the wince, when certain subjects come up, when you see certain scenes in movies, when friends say certain things, the flinch, the internal, pardon my French, but oh shit, like that. That is an indication that something is raw in your soul in that area. And to be aware of that and to invite Christ into it. The beautiful thing, like if people knew the healing power of intimacy with Christ, the churches, we'd be ripping the roofs off churches. Because they don't understand the gospel heals trauma like nothing else in the world. Intimacy with Christ. The human soul is healed through union with God. And that's why I said the world needs what you're doing more than ever, because the people of God, the friends of God in the world, are traumatized right now, and they don't know it. But as you lead them into intimacy with Jesus, it is healing trauma in them, and you don't even have to be aware of the process. Like, he gets it done. He's phenomenal at it. And so I would say the flinch, watch for the flinch. And then there are some other indicators, but they're difficult now because the pandemic has done things to our brain. Your inability to pay attention to anything for a sustained period of time. If you are not able to give your attention to anything for a sustained period of time, it's usually an indication of the effect of trauma. And then just like when Paul says we felt the sentence of death in our hearts, he preceded that by saying we despaired of life. When you start abandoning things that once gave you life, I used to paint, I don't do it anymore. I used to love mountain biking, I don't do it anymore. Whatever it is, I used to, when you start abandoning things and your world starts doing this, right? And you wake up one day and realize, wow, my life is really small. And I used to have a number of things that I did. I used to love to cook. I used to I don't do any of that. Like, whoa, time out, your heart's not well. and then what you do is you invite Jesus into it. Don't go on a witch hunt in your own soul. Just invite Jesus in and say, Jesus, what have I lost? Where are you taking me? What are you saying to me about this? And he will very kindly and very gently bring up one thing at a time. Like he is so gracious. He's so good at this. So don't go on a witch hunt and don't, in your own life and go, oh my gosh, my childhood. It's not helpful. But just inviting Christ in and saying, Lord, where did I lose heart? Where did I lose heart?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Man.
Can I ask you, can I ask the thing I want to ask?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a request of you, worshiping friends of Jesus. In this hour on the earth, there is a lack of good worship on a particular topic. And the topic is this. It is not heaven. It is the restoration of all things. One of the devil's, follow me here because it's going to blow your mind. One of the Satan's great hijacks of the gospel was to rip the church off of the future and leave us with something called heaven, which for most people is incomprehensible and totally undesirable. Like, we're going to stand in the presence of God forever. Well, who wants to do that? I mean, that like let's go to Hawaii. Let's rent dirt bikes and go through Mexico. Like, I can think of a ton of things that are more interesting than that, because it's so vague and wispy, and And the thing is, that's not the gospel. That's not the gospel. So in Matthew 19, Peter asked Jesus. Things begin to get rough. The excitement's over, and the boys on tour is over, and now they're beginning to hit. Things are getting rough. And Peter says to Jesus, this has cost us everything. What is it we are supposed to be looking forward to? And here's what Jesus says, Matthew 19:28. He says, I tell you the truth, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne. And then he says, if you have lost houses, lands, loved ones, it will completely be restored to you. The renewal of all things was a Jewish understanding of the coming of the kingdom of God. That there isn't the great airlift to heaven, that God actually returns to the earth. In Revelation 21, when John sees the New Jerusalem, it is coming to the earth. And he sees the renewed heavens and the renewed earth. Okay? And it is the restoration of everything you love. It is the restoration of everything you care about, everything that's been dear to you. The Greek word is palingenesia. It's starting over, the big renewal. And then Peter says it in Acts chapter 3. He says this. He says, Jesus remains in heaven until the time comes for God to restore everything. And the word that he uses there is apokatostasis. And it's a word that means to put things back into their original condition. So in Mark, when Jesus heals a man's hand, it's crippled, and he heals it. It's apokatostasis. It is restoration of the created goodness that is already before us. Here's what people do not understand. They conceive of the future as massive loss. I'm going to lose the life I love. I'm going to lose the world I love, and I can't even imagine the future and that sort of thing. And like, we need hope, and we need worship that helps people understand the restoration of all things. One last example of this. In Romans 8, Paul says that all creation groans for the day of its redemption. He's clearly talking about this earth because he says it was subjected to a curse. And he says that the created world, the animal kingdom, nature, your favorite beach, your favorite lake, your favorite river, it says it is going to have its day of redemption. Okay? It's right there. It's been in the scriptures all along. You read Isaiah's promises, you go through like Isaiah 60 through 65. Unbelievable. Like the Jewish hope of the coming kingdom was the restoration of all things. It was not the great airlift to heaven and the eternal church service in the sky. Our future is not the eternal church service in the sky. Adam and Eve were given this gorgeous world to then write music and be architects and go on adventures. And, it was the whole thing, right? To be human. And in Revelation 5, it says, and we, the restored people of God, are a kingdom of priests, and we will reign where? On the earth. I mean, Gabe, like this is so critical for human hearts in this hour, because the message of the end of things is just total loss in people's minds. But the answer is actually you get it all back. That Jesus was trying to say, oh, Peter, there's nothing you've lost that I will not restore to you completely. And then he names really practical things like houses and lands. And the great example of this is the resurrection of Jesus himself. When Jesus walks out of the tomb on Easter Sunday, he is the same person. He doesn't become an angel. He doesn't disappear into the cosmic Om. He doesn't just become one with the great whatever. He's Jesus. He is so much Jesus that he still has the scars. Okay? Still has them. It is restoration. And then what he does after his resurrection, look at what he does after his resurrection, because it's like, wait, you hang out with people, you talk to them, you have dinner. That looks a lot like your previous life. That's exactly the point. That the resurrected life of Jesus is the restored life that he knew beforehand. Okay? So this is the great missing thing in the church, and there's not a lot of good worship songs on this. We're not ushering people in. Hebrews 6:19 says, we have a hope that is the anchor of the soul. People have no anchor. They have absolutely no anchor for the soul because their hope is so vague or bizarre or super spiritualized. This is the anchor of the soul, the restoration of all things. And by the way, dear ones, it is super close. It's really close. Like, really, really close. And we need that in this hour. So that's my request. That's my request. Please, bring that, because we need it desperately, and there's not a lot of good worship on it.
Man, John, so good, man. Guys, I can't say anything else, but what John just encapsulated is in a book he wrote called All Things New. But it literally, for me, has been, I read a book by Randy Alcorn, John, called Heaven. And that was the first time I was introduced to this idea that this is home, and to see a sunset and go, God, I want that to not end. Like the mourning in my heart is the loss of letting go of this beauty.
Right.
And that's why we worship, because Jesus made a way for all things to be renewed. And
yes,
this is it. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Guys, hand claps all around for Mr. John Eldredge today. John, we can't thank you enough for coming on. You've opened our hearts in a way that I know we're going to be talking about in small group and just for weeks and months to come. So we love you. We're grateful to you and Stacy for the ministry that God's entrusted to you. And we'll definitely be in touch. But the impact from this time, I know, is going to go on in the earth from all these leaders.
May it protect your hearts, dear ones.
Yes.
The world has gone mad.
John, could you pray us out?
Yes, let's do.
Thanks.
So first off, the shield of the love of God. We invoke the fire love of God around our hearts, around our homes, around our lives right now. The fire love of heaven as a shield to us in this hour against all hatred in the earth. The fire love of God. And we invoke the river of life, the very life of God for us. We invoke it as a shield around us, around our hearts, into our union with you, Jesus, which is so assaulted. We invoke the river of life into us and around us and our homes and our work. We invoke the river of life as a shield against death on the earth right now. Jesus, show me how to care for my heart. Show me just very particular things that I can do to care for my heart in this hour. In your name, we all pray. Amen.